Junior is running a little late. We are now recording and live streaming.
Okay, thank you very much. We are so pleased today to have a student join us to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. This is a student from Ridgeview Elementary School, and Principal Jensen will introduce him to us.
So I've brought with me today Jaime Santana, who is a fourth grade student at Ridgeview Elementary. He's also part of our leadership team. From the first day of school, Jaime has really just kind of stood out as an individual who is looking out for the well-being of other kids at the school and just wanting to be a solution. And it's awesome to find young men like Jaime. And so when they asked for someone to come represent Ridgeview, this was the first name that came to mind. Since day one, I've just been really impressed with this young man. So this is Jaime Santana.
Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Jaime. Would you like to tell us about June's character word of the month?
June's character is focus. A state of conduition permitting clear precision or understanding, pay particular attention to.
It's good to stay focused, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. We're going to really focus in on our meeting later on after we've had a chance to have you tell us a little bit about yourself. The board members will probably want to thank you for being here with us today, and they may have a question or two, okay?
Okay.
All right. So I'm going to ask Vice President Graciela Villanueva to start the round for us.
Hi, Jaime. I'm Graciela. Thank you for being here today. You did a good job on the Pledge of Allegiance, and those were some hard words in that character word of the month. So good job sounding those out and doing the best you could. Tell me what you're looking forward to for the summertime.
For the summertime, I'm looking forward to do lots of sports.
Oh, cool. What's your favorite sport?
Soccer.
Nice. Awesome. Well, thank you for being here. You did a good job.
Director Walker?
I'd also like to thank you, Jaime, for joining us today and doing a good job. I heard you say earlier you really like math and science a lot, and now I know you like soccer. What are some other things you like to do, either inside or outside of school?
I'd probably try and focus on reading and writing because I'm not that good at reading or writing, so I'll just try focusing on that the most.
Okay, well, that's a great attitude to have, is to work not just on the things you're good at. It's the things that we all have things we can get better at too. So I'm glad you're meeting it head on. Good for you.
And that's a good use of our word of the month, Jaime. Good for you. Director Beckett.
No questions. I don't want to interrogate you, but I just want to say thank you so much for all of your hard work this year. I wish you nothing but the best for fifth grade next year. And we want to say thank you for being here today. Thanks.
Thank you, Ryan. Jaime, is there anything that you'd like to share with us that we haven't asked you about yet? No pressure. Principal Jensen, do you have anything you'd like to share about Jaime?
No, he's a real character young man, and he's impressed. Like I said before, he's impressed me from day one, and he's got as you can tell, he's got a great attitude, and he's going to accomplish great things in his life. And if he runs into obstacles, you can tell by his attitude and his focus that he's going to overcome those. And I just see a bright future ahead for him because of the young man that he is, his personality, his characteristics. His parents done a great job raising this young man.
I want to thank you both for being here with us today. And Jaime, good luck to you next year when you're a big fifth grader. I do want to share with you that Ridgeview is my children's home elementary school. That's the school that they went to when they were your age. And so I have a pretty soft spot in my heart for Ridgeview. So thank you for representing Ridgeview so well and for joining us at this meeting, and have fun during the summer. And we look forward to hearing good things about you next year, okay? All right. Okay, thank you both. Feel free to leave if you'd like to. If you need to get on with your night, we understand that. You probably have other things that are tugging at you. But we do so appreciate you staying with us, being here and staying with us for this time. Thank you so much. Raymond hasn't joined us yet, has he?
No.
He was due to read the land acknowledgement. Graciela, could I impose upon you to do that?
Yes.
Thank you.
Today, the schools of the Yakima School District rest on the ancestral lands of the 14 confederated tribes and bands of the Yakima Nation. The people of Yakima Nation inhabited more than 12 million acres across Adams, Benton, Chelan, Douglas, Franklin, Grant, Kittitas, Klickitat, and Yakima counties. Today, we honor those peoples who are tied to the land through history, legends, and culture. We acknowledge their descendants who live in the world today. We thank the caretakers of this land who have lived here and continue to live here since time immemorial. An acknowledgement is a simple, powerful way to show respect and a step toward correcting the stories and practices that erase Indigenous peoples' history and culture. It also honors the truth. As a school district, we will continue to build upon our relations with the Yakima Nation.
Thank you, Graciela. The next item on our agenda is a moment of silence to honor the memory of Patrick Joseph McCarthy. And I know, Ryan, that you knew Pat and worked with him. I believe he was on the Schools Foundation when you were. Could I ask you to read the obituary and then lead us in a moment of silence?
Certainly. Thank you, President Rice. In memory of Patrick Joseph McCarthy. Pat grew up in Helena, Montana, where he met his wife Kathleen in kindergarten. They began dating in grade school and continued through much of high school. Pat and Kathy married in 1969 and lived in Missoula, Montana before creating a home in Sunnyside, where they welcomed children Kevin and Kara. Pat was as proud as fathers come and offered his children numerous gifts, not the least of which was his unwavering devotion. To know Pat was to know kindness, compassion, community, service above self, and a generous heart that cared for all around him. While Pat had his own children and large family, he also regularly extended his enormous heart to neighbors, friends, and even friends of friends. Lifelong travel companions, Pat and Kathy enjoyed vacationing in Hawaii and skiing all over Europe. Montanans through and through, it was Pat and Kathy's lifelong dream to spend summers in their home state. They fulfilled their dream, bought a place in Big Fork where they spent 20 summers golfing, kayaking, attending concerts and plays, making new friends, and exploring beaches around Flathead Lake. Pat worked in finance and manufacturing and had a fulfilling career until he retired in 2013. He was devoted to his Catholic faith and was a member of the Yakima Downtown Rotary Club and Yakima Country Club. Pat was a longtime co-chair of the Crystal Apple Committee for the Yakima School District. He was a founding member of the First Tee of Yakima, a program that took two of his favorite things, golf and kids, and put them together. There are 74 McCarthys in the three living generations. Family, tradition, and engaging with all the generations were important to Pat. It's an understatement to say that he will be missed beyond belief. And I extend my condolences to Kathleen, another tireless supporter of the Yakima School District, and to their entire family in their time of grief. And I ask that you join me in just a moment of silence. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. And I echo Ryan's condolences to the family. Pat was a tireless volunteer on behalf of the children of the Yakima School District, and his presence will certainly be missed. Okay, next item on the agenda, we have a proclamation for Yakima Nation Treaty Day. And there's a file to go up on the screen. And then Norm, would you read the Treaty Day proclamation, please?
I would be happy to do so. Yakima Nation Treaty Day. Whereas Yakima School District recognizes that the indigenous peoples were the original occupants of lands that would later become known as the Americas, and whereas as First Americans, Native Americans, and Alaska Natives have helped shape the future of Washington and the United States through every turn of our history. And whereas Yakima School District Office of Indian Education provides services for Native American and Alaska Native students, such as tracking student data, coaching and mentoring students, advocating in our schools and community, promoting student participation, connecting students and their families to community resources, promoting engagement in cultural activities, and serving as a liaison to interface with the 14 confederated tribes and bands of the Yakima Nation. And whereas 485 students in the Yakima School District identify as Native American or Alaska Native, and whereas we serve all Indigenous students and recognize their cultural heritage, and whereas Native Americans and Alaska Natives have moving stories of tragedy, triumph, and resilience that need to be shared with future generations, and whereas our community is stronger because of the diversity of our population, and whereas inclusion is a core value of our district, and the school board has a responsibility to oppose the systemic racism toward Indigenous people in Washington and the United States, which perpetuates high rates of poverty and income inequality, exacerbating disproportionate health, education, and social crises. And whereas the school board promotes the policies and practices that reflect the experiences for Native Americans and Alaska Natives to ensure greater access and opportunity and honor our country's Indigenous roots, history, and contributions. And whereas the school board promises to engage in consultation through a collaborative dialogue with the 14 confederated tribes and bands of the Yakima Nation. And whereas the school board commits to creating successful educational outcomes for Native American, Alaska Natives, and all Indigenous students. Now, therefore, the Yakima School District Board of Directors proclaims June 10th, 2022 to be Yakima Nation Treaty Day and encourages all members of our community to join in celebrating our Native American, Alaska Native, and Indigenous students. Dated this 6th day of June, 2022. Thank you.
Thank you, Norm. We are pleased to have a partnership with the Yakima Nation, and I don't know, Superintendent Green, if you want to elaborate on this or not, it's up to you.
Thank you, President Rice. We're very excited this evening, actually, to recognize our Native students in our first celebration of our graduates, and I think the timing is perfect. And in addition, I would say that our board has been very thoughtful and progressive in setting a tone, not only for the district, but for the region, as over the last year, we've seen several of our neighboring districts embrace the opportunity to acknowledge the relationship that we have and that they have with the Yakima Nation. As I think back of the partnership, which it is really a true partnership, our students benefit from so many opportunities. And just this last week, we did have students both at the secondary level and the elementary level release salmon that they've been raising throughout this year, and that is a directly related to the relationship that we've developed and continue to expand with the Yakima Nation. So we are very grateful for that continued partnership, but more grateful for the students that we serve and the opportunity to engage in consultation and stand before tribal leaders in recognizing the services and what we do for their children. And we do that collaboratively with them. Thank you for this time.
Thank you very much, and I apologize for the background noise from the security team. Next on our agenda are items of board interest, and the first one is any reports or discussion from members of the board. Today,
I'll just share, Martha, that yesterday, Director Walker and I attended the Black Elegance event, and just want to share how inspiring of event it was. We had Erin Jones as the speaker at the event, and she was very inspiring, and know that a lot of the students and families and parents and others there were very inspired, not only by her, but by the achievements of the students there and the recognitions they're given. And we had food, and the potato salad was very good. So it was just a really fun event to attend and be a part of.
thank you for representing the board. Norm, do you have anything to share additionally?
I think Graciela summed it up very well. It really was a nice event, and I left with a good feeling. And I also left feeling kind of dazed at how old I was, because one of the presenters is a grandmother and was one of my students at Davis High School. So that was really neat to see the generations and families that were there and to know many of them. And it was really a fun event.
Thank you very much. Are there any other reports from members of the board?
Yes, I just wanted to mention that Graciela was a guest lecturer at YBC recently, and she was honoring and celebrating the life of her father, Tomas Villanueva, which is a great man, and he did a lot of great things in the Valley for farm workers, and so I just wanted to make mention of that. That was an awesome lecture that she gave the other day, and they also did an art project, right? Some local artists, and you might want to speak more about that, but it was great to see that Tomas Villanueva, his memory still is alive and well, and that we get to celebrate all the things that he's done for farm workers and people in the Yakima Valley. So thank you for that, Graciela.
Thank you, Raymond. Graciela, do you want to elaborate?
Sure. I was invited by the YVC Diversity Series to speak about my dad and the impact that he had on farm workers and all workers, really, and students and other people that he's worked on behalf. So it was really neat to present and share that information about my dad, and some fun old pictures and some stories that I learned about that I didn't know before. So it was really neat to connect with my dad in that way. In fact, today is the anniversary of his death, and so my brothers and I have a Zoom later to connect about that. So it was a very timely presentation, with the timing, and it was just really lovely. One of my favorite pictures of my dad was used in a commissioned piece of art by local artist Christy Tirado. She has a really neat method or perspective to her art. And so she essentially replicated the photo using her artistic expression. And so that'll be a permanent piece of artwork added to the YBC collection. And I haven't seen it yet, but I understand it's on display in the Student Services building. So I'm excited to take a look at that. So thank you.
Very nice. Congratulations on your part in representing and recognizing your dad. And Raymond's correct. He left his mark in a big way in the Yakima Valley. Are there any other reports from members of the board? Okay, hearing none. The next thing in the board portion of the items of board interest is a discussion on the 2022-2023 budget, board budget. You'll see attached to this agenda item in board docs is a breakdown of the proposed budget breakdown for next year's budget. We've got, I'm not going to read through this. You have it in front of you. What we had discussed in the past was the cost for board trainings and conferences. And you'll see that falls down there under purchased services. As a part of the board docs agenda, we broke out the typical meetings and trainings that board members participate in. For the Washington State School Directors Association, we have fall and spring regional meetings, which are the local meetings. General Assembly in September, which is virtual this year. Annual conference in November, which is going to be in Spokane. Legislative conference, which is in Olympia in January, February timeframe. The past few years, it has been virtual, which I've very much appreciated because it's a challenge to make it over the pass between snowstorms that time of year. And then typically in the spring, WSD has in the past done an equity summit. I don't know if they plan to do one again next year. National School Board Association, their annual conference is in April in Orlando, Florida. Their equity summit will be in coordination with the Advocacy Institute, which always occurs toward the end of January, beginning of February. I'm not sure that they have established or published a time for that yet. And then NALEO, I know that Raymond is a lifetime member and has in the past attended the NALEO conference. And this year it is in Chicago. They have not published the location for next year, and it's that conference is at the end of the month. So I'm not sure, Raymond, if they have shared that with their members as to where their conference will be next year or not.
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. So I would open up the floor and ask Graciela to facilitate that in-room discussion for budget items specifically regarding the purchase of registrations and travel. And if there's any questions from, because we haven't had to do this much over the last couple of years because we were in virtual mode for many of our events. I I would entertain questions and or comments on the board's budget at this time.
I'll actually start out with the questions. I think it might be helpful to go through the entire budget and just maybe share a high level what is included. I see these labels, for example, timesheets and benefits. So what does that really mean is we don't get paid, and I think might be a benefit for Director Beckett, who may not have seen this information before. So I'd love to know what benefits we get. I don't know of any.
You have the benefit of shaking a lot of hands
This
in the
is true.
next couple of weeks.
Yes, this is true.
So, good afternoon. The timesheets and benefits are actually for staff that support your board meetings, for timesheets for either translation or if Barb is absent. Supplies are for replacement of computers or any supplies that you might need throughout the year.
And does that include I think I remember the certificate holders that the board uses to recognize students and staff for accomplishments, those holders, like the embossed, the blue with the green, gold embossed, is that part of those supplies as well?
It could fall under that, or
Okay.
they could fall under other professional if we sent them out for printing.
Okay, thank you.
So then under purchase services, you see the registration in state and registration out of state for conferences. Other professional is anything that's purchase services outside of, just like we talked about, the printing, etc. You have food and catering, legal services, for any legal that the board needs. And I think you guys are most familiar with what you utilize that for.
And that's, let me ask you a clarifying question, is legal services, the board pays for all legal services for the district? Is that
No.
right?
No, only for what you utilize it for. So
Okay,
I'm not sure you want me to talk
Okay,
specifics,
sure,
but I
okay.
think
sure,
we have a legal department
yeah,
run by Mr. No.
okay, thank you.
Audit services, that's for our annual state audit. And then the election fees are for elections. We do share in election fees. You'll see that that is increased this year in 2023, going out for a levy and a potential bond issue. So we, at the request of President Rice, moved that up to $150,000 for 22-23.
Becky, that would also include our portion of the primary ballot that will be before the voters in August, should we have more than 2 people sign up for any of the particular board positions that are up for election, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
It should be plenty unless the county has upped their fees. But yes, we looked back in history to move that up to an adequate amount of money. And then the last is the travel at $40,000. We have seen an increase in airfare and hotels and meals, so we did move that up just slightly to accommodate any out-of-state travel and state travel.
Thank you, Becky.
You're welcome.
Are there any questions or comments from board members?
I have a question regarding the national level advocacy and equity conferences. Are those in conjunction with the Orlando conference, or are they elsewhere? And do you have any more details on those?
Those are held in Washington, D.C., and they are typically the end of January or beginning of February. I haven't seen any dates for this year's events yet.
And do you recall how many days what's the duration of that conference?
The Equity Summit, if they do it this year, is 1 day. It's on a Saturday.
Okay.
And then the Advocacy Institute is Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. And Tuesday is the day that you spend on the Hill. Sunday and Monday are in preparing for that through keynote speakers and trainings and so forth on the particular issues that the NSBA is looking at advocating for at that time.
Okay, thanks, Martha.
Any other questions or comments?
Martha, one of the comments that I made on that we'll see later on the agenda when we're talking about I think the cost of governance policy. One of the recommendations I made is that the board submit their travel requests each year during budget time, so we can budget our conference fees and travel a little bit more precisely. I think generally, from what I understand, we've kind of just looked at a number and used that number year after year. So for example, I know that I'll want to attend the WSD annual conference, and I'm not sure if it's in Spokane or Bellevue this year, but that's kind of the one conference that I attend each year. So wonder if that might be, I don't know if you want to talk about that now or later, but I think it would be helpful for the board to plan ahead and kind of determine what conferences they want to attend, so we can budget for that and make sure that it's a sufficient amount. If we all want to go to 2 or 3 conferences that are going to be really important to work that we do, then this amount may not be enough, for example.
I think the ones that cost, of course, the most money are the ones that are out of state. The regional meetings for WSD, they're about $25 each for each board member. So that's a minimal cost. General Assembly, because it's virtual this year, don't know that it's going to be much of a cost. And I do know that our voting member at General Assembly attends for free. And Norm and I will have roles there as well. So WSD will cover our costs in addition. The annual conference is in Spokane this year. And my registration is covered because I'm a past president of WSD. So my part of the cost for annual conference will just be lodging and per diem. Legislative conference, which is the end of January, beginning of February. If it's not going to be virtual this year, it will be a nominal cost. It is a 2-day conference. It starts on a Sunday, and then Monday where we spend with our legislators. So that's a 1-night stay in Olympia. So that would be and I don't know what the registration cost is for that, because my attendance again is covered by WSD. So that gives you some sense for what the WSD related costs are. I'm not sure what the costs are going to be for NSBA related, nor the NALEO conference. Because quite honestly, I haven't attended NSBA annual conference for several years. So we can have that conversation now. We are a little bit tight on time today. Maybe we could add that conversation to next week's Monday afternoon agenda. If board members could come prepared to speak to the conferences or trainings that they'd like to participate in. For next year, I think it's a great idea to have that discussion now. Typically, we wait until August to have it, but by then we've already approved the budget. So it's sort of like the cart before the horse. Is there anyone that would prefer that we address this now versus at next week's meeting?
I'd rather address it next week, and that may give us some time to research some of those costs.
Okay.
I think the issue is that we need to approve this budget today, right? Or how long do we have?
No, this is a preliminary look, and certainly you can let me know next week.
Okay. Yeah,
Yes.
because I would support a detailed budget with projections for individual board members. And so we have an idea, because these numbers don't really mean anything to me if we don't, I don't know how much airfares are now and registration fees and so forth. So just want, I would support a detailed budget.
So in order to have a detailed budget, I think we would need to know who wants to attend what. Does that make sense, Becky?
Yes,
Okay.
and then I can research some costs.
Okay.
Mhm.
So if you have you have that information after next week's meeting, that would be sufficient.
Yes.
Okay. I know you don't have anything else to do.
Nope.
So I appreciate you taking this extra step here.
Absolutely. You're welcome.
Is there any other feedback from board members on this?
No other questions in the room, Martha.
Thank you. Okay. If there are no other reports from members of the board, going once, going twice, we next have on our agenda the superintendent's update. Dr. Green.
Thank you, President Rice. I invite to the microphone our city manager, Bob Harrison. He is currently the city manager here in Yakima. He previously served as CAO of Renton, Washington, was city administrator of Issaquah, and also city manager of Wyoming, Ohio, and then in Montesee, Wisconsin. It seems like he did everything as city administrator, clerk, and treasurer. We have engaged in a regular meeting to improve relationships and to make sure that we're aligning more as a city and a school district. You may recall that he presented about 3 months ago. So we've committed to trading off opportunities, and I will present to the city tomorrow at their meeting. So I've invited him to give a just very brief update on some of the wonderful things that would be of interest here to our Yakima School Board. Bob. There you go.
There we go. All right. Little different microphone system. Oh, thank you, Superintendent Green. It's good to see you, School Board President and school board members. I appreciate the opportunity to join you today. I just have a very short presentation on a couple things. I appreciate the outreach by the school superintendent. He's trying to, both of us are committed to try and help improve the relationship between our two significant government entities that we have here in the city, and appreciate that support. And so really a couple things. First of all, we do have several volunteer committees that are made up of community members, and we have youth representatives on those commissions, and we have 3 actually right now that we're in need of positions. We have one opening on our sustainability committee, which is our newest commission, and they're focused on additional work that the city can pursue in terms of sustainability in the community. And then 2 other ones. One is our community integration committee, which has been in place for about 4 years, focused on how we enhance understanding amongst all the people who live in our community, to make sure that we're all working towards the same goal of making Yakima a wonderful place to live. And lastly is our Parks and Recreation Commission. And so the CIC and the Parks and Recreation Commission does have 2 student volunteers, youth volunteers that serve on them. And so I wanted to pass along to the school administration and to the board that if you can help us market that to your youth, we would love the opportunity to get that input into the session. These meetings meet once a month, and we've always found real value in the input that our youth provide to us during that process. And then the second thing, so I'm coming for volunteers, and the second thing I need are employees. We actually have a lot of positions open at the city right now, both in our Parks and Recreation Department, our LAIF guards. We need people to mow the lawn at the cemetery, for example. So we have a lot of positions that are open for our youth that pay pretty well. We just aren't, I think we're in the same boat as just about all businesses right now, having a hard time to find employees to come and work for us. So if we can, take advantage of some of our great youth and have a summer job available for them, we have lots of openings and we need more candidates. So with that, those are just the 2 short things I wanted to share with you today. And then I probably will see you tomorrow and see you in the next quarter. I'm here if you have any questions. I'd be happy to answer.
Not a question, but I recall the board, I think, received an email recently from a student who was very much concerned about global warming and climate change. So maybe we can find that student and forward along your contact information. That might be a good fit for the Sustainability Committee.
Terrific. Thank you. I enjoy that very much. Okay, with that, thank you for the evening, and it was good to see all of you.
Thank you so much. I would now invite Becky Neeson, our Executive Director of Finance, to the microphone. We actually, I believe it was about a month ago, there was a presentation on Esser funding, and there were some questions that came up. And as you may recall, we had some reverberating sound issues during that time. So we certainly wanted to come back and revisit and assure that we were answering the question around the Esser funding. And I believe there was a specific question from Director Navarro, but I think you'll go ahead and address those. Becky?
Thank you, Superintendent Green and President Rice, members of the board. This is an Esser funding update for you. I guess I'm in charge of looking. There we go. So if you look at, you might recall this graphic of our Esser funding, which shows the CARES, Esser 2, and Esser 3. The red box indicates when the funds became available. As a system, we tend to use funds as they become available in a sequential manner. So we started with our CARES, and then we started in with our Esser 2 money that became available in March 2021. Our Esser 3 became available in August of 2021, but we have not spent any of those dollars yet. We're still spending in the Esser 2. You can see the totals off to the right. So here's the Esser 2 distribution and how we went about allocating it, the $24.9 million. We had some indirect costs, leaving an expendable budget of 22.8. We allocated out 20% to our school buildings for them to submit proposals. So that was about $4.5 million. And then the district at 18.2 for district-wide initiatives. And that was 80% of the Esser 2. I'll go to the next slide. So
Excuse me, Becky.
Yes.
Can you remind me the purpose of Esser funds? I seem to think it had to do with COVID. I'm not sure though.
Right. So the CARES money was specific to mitigate any expenses for the COVID pandemic. And then the Esser funds are for district operations and learning recovery. You're welcome. Okay. So this is a slide that you're most familiar with. I've been presenting this each month to give you an update on where we're at with spending on the ESSER 2. So this is as of April 30th. This is what I presented at last board meeting. I'll be bringing forward the May soon at our business meeting. And this is what caused some confusion. And I have a box around the encumbered section. So ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 can be utilized the same and used for expenditures in the same manner. So what we need to do at this point is move some of these expenditures to the ESSER 3 in the amount of $702,000. The encumbrance column represents proposals that have been brought forward but not paid for yet. And so when we saw this, what triggered us is we'll be moving some of those, should they come to fruition, we'll be moving those to ESSER 3.
I'll go ahead and jump in here for just a moment. I think the issue may have been in seeing the balance at negative 702,455. And as Becky shared, the commingling of ESSER 2 and ESSER 3, really, if you're looking at that, that is actually separated only under ESSER 2. If we were to combine that currently on that slide with ESSER 3 as part of ESSER 2, the balance would be upwards of 50 some million, I believe.
Correct.
So when we're looking at that number, I would be concerned if I were looking at that, knowing that we were going into the red, so to speak, and had no way of funding that. But we know that we have access in August of this year to ESSER 3 funding, which is quite extensive. And that ESSER 3 funding, actually the timeline to spend that expires in September of 2024.
Correct.
So when we're looking at spending upwards of 50, let's give me the right number, please.
So we have 56 million.
So when we're looking at spending 56 million over the course between August of this year and September of 2024, that's quite a task. And thank goodness we have the efforts of our finance department, and we put together a great plan moving forward. But for that reason, what you're seeing there with the 700,000 in the negative column is simply only if we had all of the encumbered funding come due today, which hasn't happened yet. And even if that did happen, we would be right around the corner to dip into the ESSER 3, which again is one-time funding and goes away in September of 2024. So hopefully there's a little bit more clarity around that. I too would be looking at that thinking, why are we in the negative when we have all of this one-time federal funding coming our way? And the answer is because it's not released to us until August, and we need to really get ahead of that spending because we are one of the, I believe, top 2 or 3 beneficiaries of the funding throughout the state of Washington. In fact, I don't know if you'll recall this, but at one point when Superintendent Reichdahl came and visited our district when this was first happening, and the releasing of the federal funds was based on Title I status, his question to me was, how are you ever going to spend that much money between now and the time that this expires? And we've been very focused and have taken a proactive approach to doing so. And that's really the reason why we're at negative 700,000 and some change, which really is not overspent at this point. Is there anything that I missed in that?
No, I would just, my wondering is if, well, always focusing in on the expended column and then maybe removing the encumbered column so that you see the true picture of where we're at with the particular funding source. So ESSER 2. And if I roll forward on the slides, here's our ESSER 3 distribution at 56.1 million, which we have indirect costs of 4.5, leaving an expendable budget of 51.6. 20% of that must be spent on learning recovery. The balance of 80% is spent on the district operations. Those two specifically are broken out into separate reporting back to OSPI. So as we move forward in spending these dollars, here's a new slide. The district portion will follow the 10-point framework that we currently have with the Esser 2, which should keep the consistency in reporting for you. And then the learning recovery actually follows 4 points: staffing support, professional learning, real-time data systems, and school engagement and accelerated learning. Accelerated learning is what that should say. Sorry about that. So this is the reporting as we begin spending in the teaching and learning department. We'll be reporting it under those categories.
So just to summarize what I heard and what I think I understand is that we expended all of the Esser 2 funds and we're starting already on Esser 3, but we're included the Esser 3 and the Esser 2 reports and makes it a negative. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yes, in a nutshell. Yes.
Okay.
And we'll
Alright.
be moving that over. So it will be all positive.
Yeah, no, I'm
Yes.
just trying to understand how
know,
this.
it's- yes.
So
You
we're already
are.
spending the Esser 3. We don't have it yet, but we're included in Esser 2, which I guess that's part of my confusion is
Yes.
when we
I'm
spend all
not
Esser 2
laughing.
funds, I know
No.
we expended all Esser funds, but yet I mean, it just didn't make sense to me.
We have
so,
approved the proposals that have come forward
Yeah.
to encumber those dollars and not move them into Esser 3. So proposals come forward with just similar to a budget. We think we're going to spend this amount. And so that's what you're seeing.
So you say proposals, who do those go to?
So each building was allocated
Oh, okay.
funds.
Not
as
to
well
the
as-
state, right?
No.
Okay.
No.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I know it's confusing. It's confusing for our department as well. We're working hard.
Wonderful. Are there any other questions from board members?
And
Any
there's
que-
still,
Any
Oh.
questions in the room, Graciela?
No.
I do have one question, and that's for the learning recovery breakdown, those 4 bullets.
Mhm.
Are those what the state requires us to report on, or is that how we chose to break it down?
no, this is specific from the state. And actually, they extracted them from the federal frequently asked questions and information regarding the ARP funds, the Esser 3 funds.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Becky.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
I have one question before
Well,
we move on, if we can.
Yes, please.
With the ongoing conversation nationwide about school safety, I noticed item number 1 on both Esser 2 and Esser 3, reopen schools safely for in-person learning, is a large budget item. Can we talk a little about school safety? Is that any of that money being used as we continue to improve building safety in Yakima over time?
Absolutely. And in fact, we won't pull it up now, but I think you do have access to her report. And if you look at the 10-point list that was provided, there's actually one that lists safety along with social emotional supports. And it'll give a breakdown of the percentage that we've already spent in that area. And it's quite significant. In fact, if you look at that, compare it with the other 10 points, we're at the highest currently in that area. And there is another proposal coming forward today around some proactive safety measures. So yes, we've done some extensive work, and the things that we always want to do is make sure that we're not broadcasting those as far as what the supports are in a venue where others are potentially taking advantage of knowing the strengths and weaknesses of our system. But everything, of course, that we presented is public. around the presentation today that Stacy will share a little bit later, but also what we're doing around having personnel be part of our system. So yeah, we're taking measures. Did you have any other specific question, Director Peckett, around that I could clarify? I don't know if I got detailed enough for you.
No, that actually, it helps. I guess the confusion that I hear in the community is that there is this understanding that maybe it comes from the CARES money that was really designed about COVID relief and making schools safer as far as health-wise. And then there's some operational stuff with Esser money. And I think those two different items kind of converge in some ways. And you hear just, I mean, nothing specific, but just random questions throughout the day that make you wonder about that. And I see large budget numbers, but I just was curious about, I know it's happening, I guess, is my bottom line. I'm just kind of curious for some elaboration at some point, but that answers my question.
Let us also then, I would propose that we come back with maybe a breakdown in the safety area that's more specific. And I think that would provide some clarity and we can get those numbers for you. Okay, great.
Is this an opportunity for, pardon me for barging in here, is this an opportunity to add to the frequently asked questions on the district's website regarding, for instance, what Ryan may be hearing in the community in a way of clarifying how we are using those funds?
I think we'd have to get together with Ryan and know the specifics around the questions that he's getting. Certainly we can add anything to that document. I just would want to make sure that we're addressing the current question and not simply putting up budgetary information that would be a little bit difficult to understand without context. So I certainly am open to that. And if you, Ryan or anybody of our directors has any question that you would like addressed on that, we can certainly do that. That's not a heavy lift for us. So that would be fine. Mm-hmm. All right. Thank you, Becky. We'll try again. Thank you. All right. So I will, I know that we're pressed for time. So if you access the superintendent's update, there's a lot of informational items still listed here that I'll go through pretty quickly. One is the audit exit conference is on the 30th of this month at 1:30 p.m. And Barb, did we need any volunteers for that session? Nope. Okay. So simply an informational item about that exit conference again at the end of this month, the 30th at 1:30 p.m. We have graduation reminders. Tonight is the Native American celebration at YV Tech at 6:30. So we would love to see any of our board members who could make that or fit that into your schedule. We have graduation for Yakima Online at the Eisenhower Auditorium on June 8th at 5 o'clock. Stanton Academy at Capitol Theater at 7 o'clock that same evening. So we will go from one venue to the other, from Eisenhower Auditorium to the Capitol Theater. It can be done. We will make it. It will happen. We also then on June 9th, GED open doors at Eisenhower Auditorium at 5:30. That's Thursday. We have the 10th off, as you know, for the Treaty Days recognition, and that's this Friday. And then also on the following week on Monday, we have Davis graduation at the Sun Dome at 7 p.m., followed by the Eisenhower graduation, the Sun Dome at 7 p.m. on the 14th. Are there any questions around graduation? Any counsel to our new director on what he should wear or not wear? There you go. Yeah, practice that handshake. All right. Other information that we have for you today is that the early learning tour, we went on it to Bellingham. Bellingham School District is renowned for their early learning work. Thinking back more than 10 years ago to when I was a principal in Toppenish, I do recall and remember the reputation that Bellingham had at that time, and we were able to connect with their assistant superintendent who oversees early learning and also special education. She came to our district and met with us about a month ago, and we took a small team on Wednesday of last week and spent a day. Dr. Rodriguez was one of those people that went, along with we had Hector Mendez from our new principal supervisor, who's coming on board, as well as Jamie Johnson, our new principal over early learning, along with some community partners that went to meet with Krista Dominguez and her team to see her early learning program, what they've developed, hear about the wonderful statistics that they have in meeting the needs of their students, and to see what we could do to bring that back to support our students in our setting. It was very valuable, and during that process, you'll see that's listed on the document here as well, that we learned about a national P3 institute, which is taking place October 17th through the 20th in San Diego. We are applying to be one of 10 districts nationwide to be a part of that process, and we're hoping that we can partner with one of our districts on the west side and come up with a great proposal to make that a reality. But I simply wanted to inform the board that we have a very strong focus on that early learning goal, goal number 1 of our strategic plan. We are taking a proactive stance, and we'll continue to give you updates on anything that we do implement and any progress that happens in our early learning program as we move forward. And also wanted you to know that we are looking at national impact and what we can do in reaching out at that level to make sure that we're partnering with districts that are having success across the nation. Is there anything that you would like to add, Dr. Rodriguez? I know you knew it was coming, but.
It was a really good trip. It has been great to leverage the relationships and connections we have across our state to really gain access to looking at a program that has been in place longer than some of our programs like transitional kindergarten, and see where we can be headed next. And we did also have Nancy Smith, who is our new Executive Director of Special Education Services, that attended with us as well. As you know, approximately half of our preschool programs are special education in nature. So we also had some wonderful dialogue around inclusion in the preschool setting, and we're really excited to dig into that work next year as a team.
Are there any questions?
A couple of easy questions. National P3, is that preschool to 3rd grade? Is that what that means? And then for graduations, I guess for Director Beckett, there's a loose effort to try to match our outfits with whatever school we're at. Not required, but a loose effort. So can you remind me the colors of Yakima Online and Stanton?
Oh, holy moly, here we go. Charlotte, you're on. I think red, green.
Like an emerald, right? Like a dark green. Okay. Purple. Okay, thank you.
Boy, that was a curveball. Thank you. That was, wow. Yeah. All right. Any other questions? That question not only threw me for a loop, but I looked over at our secondary, and she was like, oh my gosh, where's my... Keeping us on our toes. Thank you.
Well, the only reason I know is because I put together slides 5 minutes before this meeting, and I was on their website. So that's why I know.
Don't give that away. That concludes the superintendent update. Thank you. Back to you, President Rice.
Thank you very much. I think many of us would be hard pressed to try to remember all of the school colors for all. I mean, we know what Eisenhower's and Davis's are, but the smaller programs, sometimes that's a challenge to remember that. Okay, the next item on our agenda is our first opportunity for comments from the public. This would be for agenda items only. Barb, do we have anyone who is either present in the room and has signed up, or who signed up online for comment at this time?
We do not.
Okay, so we will move on. Next, we have our action items. Item number 1 is approval to purchase the crisis alert system from Syntegics using the King County Directors Association, or KCDA, contract. Stacy, I see you on my screen.
Yes, I am here. Would you like me to move forward, Director Rice?
Unless Dr. Green has something to lead into this with.
Well, just simply acknowledge that Stacy, as you know, is joining us virtually this evening. So we appreciate you being able to do so. We know that there's been some challenges, and one of the benefits of being virtual is for you to be able to join us in this setting. So thank you, Stacy. We're glad you're making time, and please go ahead.
In
You're
other
welcome.
words, Stacy, you are never safe from prying eyes.
I appreciate that. I would much rather be in person. But thank you for the opportunity to do it this way. It's not my choice, but it's something that just has to happen. So we've been working on this, and there was Sarah and Andy did a board report May 9th on Syntegics and the purpose behind it, and what it's about, and what type of safety and security it would bring to our school district. And so this is the approval to purchase that system in the amount of $1,189,567. We're requesting action on that. It does align to strategic plan alignment. Goal number 2, empowered, connected, supported, and engaged. This action will provide a safe learning environment for students and staff. And the background, and again, it's a crisis alert system. It's a badge that can be worn around the neck. And in tapping that badge, you can alert administrators in the building, and or if you keep tapping that badge, it will alert 911. I happened to be coming back from my cardiologist on the 9th and was able to listen on the phone to Sarah and Andy's presentation. And I can share with you that there are many ways to configure this badge in response. And I recall one of Director Rice's questions was, if the night custodian's working at night by themselves and they're clicking the badge, there's nobody within the building to notify of a medical emergency. We can actually configure those badges to contact 911 in the event that that individual is there by themselves. So it is both used for medical alerts, as well as in the event that there is an intruder or an unwanted person on campus or in the building. And as you do recall, the monitors will track only 1,000 feet from the actual building or where they're placed on the campus. So that will encompass the playgrounds as well as athletic fields, etc. And as we continue to work with Syntegics and explore different options and updates, we're really excited about the ability to get that response in a very quick period of time. So again, we will sit down in the summer and look at how do we want to configure for different groups of people so that we can provide the safety and support for all employees and students in the Yakima School District. Are there any questions I can answer?
Any questions from the board?
No questions here, Martha.
Thank you very much. The board is being asked to approve the purchase of the crisis alert system from Syntegics using the King County Directors Association contract in the amount of $1,189,567. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Oops, second.
Moved by Norm, seconded by Graciela. Is there any discussion?
Oh, I do have one question. That's the initial purchase, but is there an ongoing annual fee for, operating the system, and is that included in that 1.2 million, or is that going to be a regular budget item later on? And how significant is that going to be? That would be my only question.
So the 1.2 million is a 5-year complete contract for all upgrades. And one of the things that, not that we sell used cars or anything, but one of the things we were really excited about is that Syntegics is going to provide all the ongoing maintenance for all of the equipment over the next 5 years. So in other words, there will be no burden on our maintenance department or our operations to fix any of the equipment. That is going to be done by them. And so that we think that was a real bonus to entering into this contract by having all of that paid for within that $1.1 million over the next 5 years.
Thank you, Stacy.
You're welcome, Director.
And I do have a question. Does this come from, maybe this is from Becky, Esser 2 or 3 funds or from the district budget?
Esser. This is Esser funding, Director Navarro. And I don't know, I think it's 2. I think it's Esser 2 funding. Is that correct, Becky?
Hang on a second. She's coming up, Stacy. Go ahead.
But yes, it is Esser funding. It's part of that percentage that you do see there.
We would fund this under Esser 3.
Any other questions from the board?
No other questions.
Thank you. Barb, could you call the roll, please?
Director Beckett,
Aye.
Director Walker,
Aye.
Director Navarro Jr.,
Aye.
Vice President Villanueva,
Aye.
President Rice.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We've now reached the second opportunity for comments from the public. This would be for any item that the public wish to address the board on. Barb, do we have anyone who is either in the room and signed up or has signed up virtually?
We do not.
Okay. So we will be moving on to our policy governance work. The first item this evening is the policy governance monitoring report for policy 1000.2.3, financial condition and activities. Becky.
Thank you, President Rice, members of the board. This is financial condition and activities 1000.2.3 for as of May 2022. The policy statement with respect to the district's actual ongoing financial condition and activities, the superintendent will not cause or allow the development of fiscal jeopardy or material deviation of actual expenditures from Board of Directors priorities established in ends, goals, policies. Further, without limiting the scope of the foregoing by this enumeration, number 1, the superintendent will not expend more funds than have been received in the fiscal year unless revenues are made available through other legal means such as the use of fund balances and board authorized transfer of funds from the fund balance. This is in compliance. I interpret this to mean the administration will not manage the budget of the district in a manner that causes the depletion of the unreserved, unassigned fund balance of 5% of the total general fund budget without board approval. See number 3 of this delineation. The evidence of compliance, I certify that the unreserved unassigned fund balance at fiscal year end 2021-22 will be $14,190,256 or greater as prescribed by the board. The total 2021-22 general fund budgeted expenditures are $283,805,113. 5% of the budgeted expenditures is $14,190,256,000. Further evidence will be the 2021-22 annual financial statement. Number 2, the superintendent will not indebt the organization or create obligations over a longer term than revenues can be safely projected, or fail to establish provisions for modifying obligations in the event of revenue losses. This is in compliance. I interpret this to mean that the administration will not recommend approval of contracts, issuance of debt, or other obligations that would draw the district's unreserved, unassigned fund balance below the 5% prescribed by the board. Evidence of compliance, I certify that all current and encumbered obligations do not exceed the 2021-22 budget expenditures adopted by the board that sets the maximum that can be obligated by the district. Number 3, the superintendent will not fail to maintain an unreserved fund balance of 5% or greater of the total general fund budget without board approval. This is in compliance. I interpret this to mean the district will maintain an unreserved, unassigned fund balance of 5% or greater of the general fund expenditure budget on an annual basis. The evidence, I certify that the district's 2021-22 general fund fiscal year-end unreserved unassigned fund balance will be 5% or greater of the general fund expenditure budget. Further evidence will be the district's 2021-22 annual financial statement. Number 4, the superintendent will not fail to settle payroll and debts in a timely manner. This is in compliance. I interpret this to mean that all staff salaries, payroll taxes and benefits, vendor payments, and long-term debt payments shall be processed and paid according to timelines established by law, district regulation, and negotiated agreements. The evidence of compliance, I certify that all payroll, vendor, and long-term debt obligations are being processed and paid in a timely manner. Payroll is processed monthly and all employees are paid via direct deposit. Payments of payroll and retirement taxes are also submitted electronically to the respective financial institution. Payments to vendors are processed bi-monthly. All invoices are reviewed and audited to verify receipt of goods or services. Payments on principal for long-term debt, along with accrued interest, are processed directly by Yakima County in the months of December and June. The district has an excellent record of maintaining credible resource management and systems of internal control. The 2019-20 annual state audit report previously provided to the board states that the district operations complied in all material respects with applicable state laws, regulations, and its own policies, and provided adequate controls over the safeguarding of public resources. They noted no instances of non-compliance that were material to the financial statements of the district. The 2020-21 annual state audit is currently in progress. Number 5, the superintendent will not allow tax payments or other government-ordered payments or filings to be overdue or inaccurately filed. This is in compliance. I interpret this to mean that all government payments and reports shall be processed within the timelines prescribed. The evidence, I certify that all government payments and reports are processed and are paid in a timely manner. The district has numerous county, state, and federal reports, grant applications, and payments to process. The finance department monitors reports and filings that are essential to district operations and/or have funding attached to them. During the last year, the district has not lost or jeopardized any funding due to the timeliness, or accuracy of these reports. Following is a list of the major required reports and filings: the budget, the annual financial statement, monthly student enrollment, state, federal, and private grant applications and claims, payroll reports for taxes and benefits, accident claims, and reports for insurance purposes. Number 6, the superintendent will not use any restricted reserves for any use other than its intended purpose without board approval. This is in compliance. I interpret this to mean the district must accurately account for program revenues and expenditures of state, federal, and certain grant awards to identify restricted reserves at year-end. Restricted reserves are for use by the intended program unless the board approves otherwise. The evidence, I certify that the district reserves have been utilized solely by the programs that generated the funding. Restricted programs are monitored to ensure expenditure charges reflect accurately. Fiscal year end includes a final accounting by program, revenue, and expenditures to determine any restricted reserves. These amounts are reported on the district's annual financial statement. Number 7, the superintendent will not fail to aggressively pursue receivables after a reasonable grace period. I interpret this is in compliance. I interpret this to mean the district will implement an accounts receivable system that is commonly practiced in the business industry. The evidence, I certify that the district invoices customers promptly and maintains an active collection practice for those that fail to pay in a timely manner. Customers are contacted when accounts are past due. Accounts are turned over to a collection agency when all attempts to collect the debt have been exhausted. The major area generating accounts receivable is facility rentals and third-party payees for field trips. Number 8, the superintendent will not undertake capital building projects without assurance of available funding to complete the project. This is in compliance. I interpret this to mean the construction or remodel of capital facilities. In general, expenditures of this nature require significant funding which cannot be accessed without board approval. Other financing sources for capital projects, such as voted and non-voted debt issuance, also require board approval. The evidence, I certify that the district has not undertaken any capital building projects or issued debt without formal board approval. Number 9, the superintendent will receive, process, or disperse funds under internal controls that are insufficient under the State of Washington Accounting Manual for Public School Districts. This is in compliance. I interpret this to mean the district shall follow the accounting guidelines outlined in the State of Washington Accounting Manual for Public School Districts and implement internal controls to ensure accounting compliance. The evidence, I certify the district's finance department adheres to strict internal controls. This is affirmed by the 2019-20 state audit report previously provided to the board that the district operations complied in all material respects with applicable state laws, regulations, and its own policies, and provided adequate controls over the safeguarding of public resources. They noted no instances of noncompliance that were material to the financial statements of the district. The 2020-21 annual state audit is currently in progress. Number 10, the superintendent will not fail to keep complete and accurate financial records by funds and accounts in accordance with the State of Washington Accounting Manual for Public Schools. This is in compliance. I interpret this to mean that the district shall follow the State of Washington Accounting Manual for Public School Districts and maintain separate funds to account for the financial activity appropriate to that fund. The evidence, I certify the monthly budget status reports provided to the board displays activity for each fund maintained by the district. The district currently uses the following funds: the general fund, capital projects fund, debt service fund, associated student body fund, transportation vehicle fund, and private purpose trust fund. Further evidence of each fund's activity is reported on the district's annual financial statement and subsequently reviewed during the annual state audit. Number 11, the superintendent will not fail to present at least a brief verbal report to the board which summarizes written information provided when updated financial information is available. This is in compliance. I interpret this to mean the superintendent or designee will provide a monthly brief verbal report on updated financial information. The evidence, I certify that each month the superintendent or designee provides a brief report of the current monthly financial position and enrollment numbers compared to the previous year's corresponding numbers. And number 12, the superintendent will not fail to provide the board with projections on any significant financial impacts of past or proposed legislation. And this is in compliance. I interpret this to mean the district will use its best efforts to project significant financial impacts to the district due to approved or proposed legislation. The evidence, I certify that any significant financial impact to the district as a result of the 2022 legislative session will be incorporated into the 2022-23 budget. And I have no recommended policy changes for you.
Thank you, Becky. Are there any questions from board members?
Cannot hear you, Martha.
Are there any questions from board members?
I do have a question. On number 2, could you elaborate more on the interpretation? I'm not sure how the 5%, unreserved and assigned fund balance below 5% applies to the interpretation. I thought this had to do more with if we're overexpended in the budget. That the superintendent would not in-depth organization or create obligations without or which can be safely projected. So just wondering if you can elaborate more on that interpretation. And again, how that the reserved fits into that.
Yeah. So, well, Superintendent Green, I don't know if are you okay with me responding?
Yeah, sure. I'll respond afterwards if necessary.
Okay,
Or
thank you.
unless you want me to start out. It's up to you.
No, I've got it,
Okay.
I think. Let me give it a shot. Okay. So in this policy governance, the board prescribes that we set aside 5%. And so should we approve contracts or bring them forward to the board that would draw that down and not be transparent with you about that? That's why I have that as the evidence of compliance. That should we have anything that would be compromising that 5% or greater, bringing that forward.
Okay, so then, and then the evidence of compliance, does obligations mean long-term obligations or the long-term? I'm not sure. Does that mean contracts, as you just mentioned?
Yeah.
Obligations refers to contracts? Or
Yes.
okay, because when I hear obligations, I see anything that's been encumbered or spent or
Right.
whatever in the district. So I just want to clarify the terms, the terminology here. Thank you.
And maybe further evidence, Director Navarro, would be we cannot exceed the appropriations in the budget without coming forward to the board for a budget revision for that year. So every year you approve an annual budget that has a set amount of appropriations. And when I speak about this particular section and speaking about general fund, but it could apply to any of the other funds, but I would think that might be further evidence. I could certainly amend it to include that.
Oh, no, I just want to further, I just want to understand the interpretation better. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Becky.
You're welcome.
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Just checking that my mic hasn't gone on the fritz. Okay. We will have the Survey Monkey out to you all by tomorrow with a return on Friday so that we can discuss this at our meeting next Monday. Okay. Next, we have monitoring report for 1000.2.1 treatment of students and their parents or guardians. Stacy Locke.
Thank you, President Rice. So this is our annual report here for June 2022. The overall statement with respect to interactions with students and their parents, guardians, or those applying to be students, the superintendent will not cause or allow conditions, procedures, or decisions which are unsafe, untimely, undignified, unlawful, or unnecessarily intrusive. The overall for 1000.2.1 is in compliance. As we go to number 1, further, without limiting the scope of the foregoing by this enumeration, the superintendent will not elicit information for which there is no clear purpose. And an example of that, if you go down to where we're looking at immunizations for students, and we see that the out of compliance enumeration numbers that we do solicit are for 21-22, we're down to 126, but actually right now we are in the 79 to 80. So we're almost 90, over 95% in compliance. And so we're pretty excited with those numbers for this school year. In number 2, the superintendent will not use methods of collecting, reviewing, transmitting, or storing student, parent, guardian information that fail to protect against improper access to the material elicited. Again, in compliance, and this really relates to the information and evidence gathered around FERPA and HIPAA compliance with the district. When we look at number 3, the superintendent will not fail to establish with students and their parents, guardians, a clear understanding of what may be expected from the service offered. Again, we are in compliance. And when we look at services offered, we're looking at things like highly capable special education, sections 504, Title I migrant, etc. When we look at number 4, the superintendent will not fail to inform students and their parents, guardians of this particular policy, 1000.2.1. And our compliance of that is are things like the student parent handbook, or if you're on the school district website, find fast, searchable compliance is right there. And number 5, the superintendent will not fail to provide a way to be heard for persons who believe that they have not been accorded a reasonable interpretation of their protections under this policy. Once again, we're in compliance, but what I'd like to share with you that's different from previous years is that our EES survey was not completed until last Thursday. Therefore, I do not have or have not received that information at this point in time. However, our Let's Talk items have been updated to the 2022 school year and have improved. And then you had the master survey, the master calendar survey that went out this year that had been reported to the board on a couple different timelines. And last but not least, if you look at HIB for 21-22, the informal complaints are down. The reports not found to be HIB are down. A few more complaints or reports found to be HIB related than 2019-2020. And we still had some reports pending. 2020 and 2021 was during the pandemic, and so that's kind of an outlier. And when we look at 6, the superintendent will not fail to provide an open, responsive, and language appropriate environment that encourages parents. It's in compliance, and probably important to know that 50 school and district websites have information available to the public in a language that is of their comfort. At this point in time, there are no recommendations to change.
Thank you, Stacy, for summarizing your monitoring report. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Any questions from the board?
Not a question, but a comment. Maybe this question is for you, Martha. I look forward to the EES, whatever that survey is called, the student and parent feedback survey each year. I think that's a critical part of what had been, for me, a critical part of this monitoring report in previous years. And so I'm a little hesitant to fully evaluate or respond to this monitoring report without that data. So wonder if we might consider pushing the survey out so we have an opportunity to review the EES, the student and parent survey data.
Stacy, when do you think you might receive that?
I'm not sure. Dr. Darling, do you know when the results of that survey may be back?
So this year because of some changes that we did earlier in the year, trying to do a bunch of micro surveys, and that didn't yield very good results. This survey was launched about 3 months later than it normally is. So we anticipate having the results probably within the next 3 or 4 weeks.
So that would push us out into July, at least. Does the board wish to table this monitoring report until we have that, or?
I don't necessarily want to delay things. Would another option be to bring back a truncated version of the report or add a monitoring report? Again, that survey feedback is, I think, really critical for the board to review the students and parents and how they feel about the district and things like that.
What we could do is review this monitoring report as for what it contains now, and then in July just do a minor monitoring report for the EES survey information.
Martha, I'm good with approving or taking action on this policy today. I'm not sure this policy calls for results. I think it calls for whether or not there's a process or processes in place that guarantee those certain actions. So unless I'm reading the policy differently, I don't know if we need the data to approve this policy.
We would deem this policy in compliance.
Okay, so maybe we just move forward with the monitoring report today, and then when the results from the EES survey come in, those can just be reported to us?
Are those
Yes,
part of
we
the
have-
ends? Are they part of the ends report?
Yes, they are.
Yes. So that would be a duplication then, I guess. Unless we want to see the data right away, I'm for that as well.
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
Yes, as Dr. Green mentioned, that data is included in the annual ends report. But I'm okay with reviewing that data now if the board wishes.
Okay, what's the pleasure of the board?
I'm comfortable reviewing what we have now and making a decision on the report we just received with the information we have, and either getting a separate report on the EES or an addendum, or just including it in the ends report. The key thing is that we get that data eventually. I don't know that it needs to stop us from moving forward with what we have now in terms of Stacy's report.
Ryan, do you have any thoughts on this?
This is all Greek to me, but it certainly sounds like the process, as long as we know it's coming down the road, gives us the opportunity to hear the data. I don't see any reason to delay moving forward with this today.
Okay. All right, so we'll move forward with this today. And then just either when the data is available or as a part of the ends report process, review the EES survey data. Barb will send the Survey Monkey out tomorrow. We'll ask that it be returned by Friday so that we can review it next Monday. Okay. All right. Next, we have a review of 3 board policies. The first being 1000.4.2, accountability of the superintendent. And I've asked Director Navarro to lead us through a summary of this policy.
Policy 1000.4.2, accountability of superintendent, states that the superintendent is the board's only link to the operational achievement and conduct. Everything else falls under the superintendent. And also says that the board will not give instructions to individuals that report to superintendent, will not evaluate any staff, and accept as required by law and normally dispose of a consent agenda. The board will not participate in discussions or actions involving everything that having to do that, everything that the has been assigned to the superintendent. And the final paragraph there is the board will view superintendent performance as identical to organizational performance in a nutshell. Thank you.
Thank you, Raymond. Are there any questions from board members? Is there anyone who wishes to edit this policy, to either add or delete anything? Okay. This one will go out with all of the others in the SurveyMonkey. Next item on the agenda is a review of policy 1000.4.3, delegation to the superintendent. I've asked Director Walker to lead us through a summarized version of this policy.
Okay, and this is entitled Delegation to the Superintendent, and also reinforces the various roles of the board and the superintendent in a policy governance model. And in this statement, the board of directors will instruct the superintendent through written policies which prescribe the ends, goals of the organization, and describes organizational situations and actions to be avoided. So accordingly, the board develops policies for the superintendent to achieve for specified recipients at specified cost. 2, the board will develop policies which limit the latitude of the superintendent in choosing the organizational means, but essentially the means are devised by the superintendent and their staff. The board does not just prescribe the means of achieving the ends goals. Number 3, as long as the superintendent uses reasonable interpretation of the board's ends and goals and executive limitations policies, let me see. There's a phrase in here, I might want to look at re-editing this. It gets a little convoluted, but including not allowing conditions which are unlawful, of course, or imprudent. But essentially, it's saying that the superintendent's interpretation of the ends goals, if they're reasonable, are up to the superintendent, and he's authorized to establish further policies, decisions, and actions based on the ends goals. And 4th, the board will make the final determination as to whether the superintendent's interpretation is reasonable. And then step 5, the board may change its ends goals and executive limitations policies, thereby shifting the boundary between the board and the superintendent domains.
Thank you, Norm. Are there any questions on this one from board members?
No.
Is there anyone who wishes to edit or suggest edits to this particular policy?
Like I just said, in reading section 3, I'll look through that again and see if that makes sense. It just seemed a little unclear at first, but I'll take a look at it. It may be okay.
You know, there's a bit of a long sentence in the middle of it there. If you could take a look at that, that'd be great. Thank you. This one will also go out tomorrow for return on Friday. Next, we have a review of policy 1000.4.4, monitoring superintendent performance. I've asked Director Villanueva to lead us in a summary review of this particular policy.
Policy 1000.4.4 outlines how the board monitors the superintendent's performance. Systemic and rigorous monitoring of the superintendent's job performance is made against the only expected superintendent job outputs, which are reasonable progress toward accomplishments of board policies on end goals and organizational operation within the boundaries established by board policies and executive limitations. Monitoring is to determine the degree to which board policies are met. Information that does not do this will not be considered to be monitoring information. The board can acquire monitoring data by 3 different methods: internal report from the superintendent or his staff, external report by a disinterested third party, or by board direct inspection. Our default method of monitoring is by internal report. The consistent performance standard for executive limitation policies shall be whether the superintendent has reasonably interpreted the policy and complied within the provisions of the board policy being monitored. Consistent performance standards for end goals shall be whether the superintendent has reasonably interpreted the policy, developed quantitative indicators and benchmarks, and achieved annual reasonable progress towards the board's end goals policies. In its monitoring, the board will include incidental reports, can include incidental reports that the superintendent and the board agree meet the intent of reasonable interpretation or performance reporting. Each report of monitoring data will generate 3 board items that will be part of open public board meetings, the procedure the board uses to review and approve or not approve the superintendent's monitoring reports is outlined. The board makes the final determination as to whether the superintendent's interpretation is reasonable. The board applies the reasonable standard in that final determination. By April 1st of each year, the board conducts a performance evaluation of the superintendent. That is a summary of the monitoring reports for the year. The superintendent's contract extension and compensation is decided after review of monitoring reports submitted during the contract year. And policies that instruct the superintendent are monitored at a frequency determined by the board. And there is a list of all of the board policies, the standard method of monitoring, and the frequency in which each policy is reviewed. And the board can monitor, however, the board can monitor any policy at any time by any method. And all employment decisions of the superintendent remain the sole discretion of the board.
Thank you, Graciela. Are there any questions from board members? Is there anyone who wishes to suggest any edits to this policy? Okay, this one will also go out tomorrow. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Look for 5 different SurveyMonkey requests tomorrow. Next, we have a review, a pre-approval discussion for monitoring reports that came before us, I think, at the last meeting. The first one is Policy 1000.2.0, Global Executive Constraint. All 5 board members responded to this survey. And with the exception of one element, all 5 agreed that the superintendent was in compliance with the various elements of the policy. And on that particular one, which is number 4, that was scheduled, it's currently scheduled twice annually. The question was, is twice annually sufficient? And somebody checked once annually is sufficient. Is there any discussion on this one?
Martha, I'd also be comfortable with moving this policy to an once annual review. I think it had been once a year, and then when we hired a new superintendent, if I recall correctly, we wanted to review it more frequently to make sure expectations were in line. So I'd be
Okay.
comfortable with moving this review once a year to once a year.
Thoughts from other board members? Anyone opposed to moving it to once a year? Okay, I don't hear anyone, so we will move this to once a year. Barb, I don't remember if this is the first or second review of this one. If it's
The
the
second one
first,
this year.
I'm sorry,
It's the second one this year.
it's the second one. So the change will take place next year.
Yeah, I'll note it on the calendar when I'm making it.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have policy 1000.2.2, working environment of staff. All 5 board members responded to this survey, and all 5 agreed that the superintendent is in compliance with all elements of this survey. Are there any questions or comments from board members on this one? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on. The next one is policy 1000.2.9, communication and support of the board. All 5 board members responded to this survey, and all 5 agreed that the superintendent is in compliance with all elements of the survey. Is there any discussion or comment or questions from board members on this one? Okay. So in compliance and in accordance with our policies, we can take action at this time to approve the monitoring reports for these 3 policies. We can do that with 1 vote. And so I would entertain a motion for approval of the monitoring reports and subsequent surveys for policies 1000.2.0, 1000.2.2, and 1000.2.9.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Norm, seconded by Ryan. Is there any discussion? Barb, could you call the roll, please?
Director Beckett,
Aye.
Director Walker,
Aye.
Director Navarro Jr.,
Aye.
Vice President Villanueva,
Aye.
President Rice.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. The next pre-approval deals with the board rating reports. The first one is 1000.3.8, cost of governance. And our survey results on this are kind of all over the board. All 5 board members did respond to this survey. With regards to question 1, or item 1, there was only 1 non-compliant, 1 element that was deemed to be non-compliant. We have 2 comments. The first comment, I don't know that we want to take time to read this out loud. It's available on board docs and we've had an opportunity to review it. I'm not sure who made this comment, but if you want to elaborate on this, we can take a few minutes to do that. Okay, the second comment has a number of various comments located within it. I don't know who wrote this comment, but do you want to elaborate on this item?
Martha, that was my comment. I don't have a lot to add to what I've written. Just recommending, I'd mentioned earlier that the board be more precise in its budget for training for the board. And so we've talked about that and have a plan for that. And also recommending, I've been thinking about this for a while, I think it would be a healthy practice for the board to look at some kind of schedule, or at least have a discussion of looking at what systems or which policies we might be interested in having a external monitoring through we just read a disinterested third party. I think that would be just a healthy practice to maybe have a rotation of some policies reviewed by an external party. So that might be a discussion that we can have at the board retreat to determine if that's of interest to the board. And if so, we can maybe determine which policies those might be. And then my last comment, this is something that the board's discussed for some time around how we listen to our community owner voices. It's a frequent topic of discussion by the board, so it might be a good opportunity to look at maybe doing a study or a gap analysis to determine how well the board is hearing from our community owners and determining if what we're doing is sufficient, or if we should actively do more to solicit input from the community.
Okay. The agenda for the board retreat is rapidly becoming unmanageable because we keep it's like the Christmas tree. We keep adding ornaments to it. I would like to suggest that we take some time between now and the next board meeting. If Barb could, we can send out a very drafty draft of the agenda, or the topics, I guess is better. The topics that we have said we want to move to the retreat agenda. And maybe at our next meeting, we could have a discussion about, do we really want everything that we've added to the retreat agenda on that agenda, or can we parse some of it out and either have another day earlier, like, I don't know, sometime in July or early August, or another time later, if there are things that could maybe be pushed out a little bit, maybe into September. So I'm hoping that Barb is making, look at you type. I'm hoping that you're making a note that maybe you could send out the draft agenda for the retreat, and we can do some parsing of that for breaking things out and putting them someplace else. Does that sound reasonable to board members?
Sure.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's it.
Are there objections? Okay. So a little homework for the board for next Monday's board meeting. Okay. Then we have a review of the board rating report for 1000.3.9 process for addressing board member violations. And we had all 5 board members respond to this survey, and all 5 agreed that the various elements, the board is in compliance with the various elements identified in the policy. And then last week, Director Navarro volunteered to rewrite or edit the policy, and a copy of that edit was provided to you all in board docs. And Raymond, I wondered if you could walk us through this, please.
Sure. So the reason for the edits in my mind, for the purpose I had, was just to really deal with or address increasing due process for all board members. And I won't go into any details unless we need to, but so just, what was on my mind is really adhering to certain rules, principles, or just a process, having a process in place that's consistent every time that there's an alleged violation. Because in the past, and again, I'm not going to go deep into this, but in the past we've had allegations where we've had different processes in place. And so that's what I'm really referring to with this revision, just fairness, due process, and being consistent with having something that's an outline that we can follow consistently every time there's an alleged violation. So, and you can see there just very quickly, and I just added, that each board member is responsible for self-monitoring and initiating the process. So we can't leave this to our board president to initiate a process. We have to all engage in. And if we see that somebody, maybe there's an alleged violation, we need to bring it up. Also, let's see, and preferably it'd probably be better, and I didn't write this, I thought about writing it. If there's a violation, if I see Director Beckett, I think that he's violated, maybe I should go to him and talk to him and say, hey, I think you're outside the policy. Maybe just alert him, talk to him about it. I don't know if that's something we can add to that, rather than go to the president and have the president. I don't know. I don't know if the board is to that point where we can really talk to each other or confront each other about allegations of violations of the policy. But anyways, that's just a side note. So for the first step is for a private setting to be held with the offending or alleged offending board member and board president or representative, vice president or whomever. And after the discussion, if there's agreement and understanding, then the issue can be considered to be resolved, and there's no further action. If the alleged offending board member disagrees with the president or the representative, then that board member could take that to the entire board and present the case, and the board could determine whether or not, I believe that the board should determine whether or not there's been a violation, not one person. And I believe that the entire board should determine whether or not there should be a third party outside investigation, not one person. And so I'm just trying to, outline the process here. Excuse me. So that's number 2. Number 3 is that, again, if the board determines that there was indeed a policy violation, then they'll vote to take a certain action. And there's 3 options. One is to public censure. 2 is remove the board member from leadership or committee positions. And then also, I don't know if we have a policy on this, on unexcused absences and declaring the seat vacant once that board member has exceeded the number of unexcused absences. So those are the basic, that's the basic process that I outline. Again, it's just for due process fairness for all board members. And I think that's it, Martha.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
We can do this a couple of ways. We could deem this as first reading for this policy this edited policy, and then use the interim time between now and whenever the second reading would be for approval to review it, make any suggestions to particular pieces of it, or we can work on it and submit it as in a more finalized form for first reading. Is there a preference from board members?
I have some. I think thinking option 2 might be a better way to go. So I have some comments and suggestions for revision for consideration. Should I talk about that now, Martha?
Well, we have a hard stop in 7 minutes.
Okay.
So let's put this on the table, and if you can come up with your suggestions between now and next week,
Okay.
then we can have it. I don't know I don't have off the top of my head what's on next week's agenda, but we will have a hard stop at the end of next week's agenda as well, because that's Davis's graduation. It's not quite as hard a stop as it is tonight, but
Yeah.
anyone with any comments or suggestions, bring those to next week's meeting, and we'll add this to the agenda for next week, discussion about this particular policy. Okay?
Sounds good.
All right. So given that we had comments on both of these policies, I'm going to hold off with the approval of both of these board rating reports until either next week or the business meeting. Is there objection from board members to do that?
No.
I'm sorry?
No.
Okay. Is that the consensus in the room?
I think so. No one else is speaking up, so everyone's shaking their head that no is their
Okay.
comment.
All right. Okay, that brings us to the end of our agenda. Mr. Superintendent, do we have a need for executive session?
We do not.
Okay. Thank you all so much. I apologize if the meeting puts you in a bit of a bind to get to the Native American dinner celebrating our Indigenous students. And I wish you all a wonderful week. Hopefully we will see you Thursday night at the Wednesday night at the Stanton and Yakima online graduation, and then Thursday at the Open Doors and GED completers ceremony. Have a great week and a good weekend, and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all so much. Drive safely going home.